Hey, this is Todd, and I want to introduce you to building a story brand. There's some principles here that I think we can really build off of, and that can be used to clarify our message and really help us stand out. So let's dive in. So, who's Donald Miller? He is a screenwriter turned marketer, and he really illustrates the power of story throughout the marketing process and how it can cut through the clutter. I'm going to make 3 short videos that take a dive into these principles, and then we're going to do an exercise that helps us directly apply it. So everywhere you look around, you'll see application for these principles. This first video, let's take a look at some of the fundamentals by looking at 3 questions. The first question is, why stories? Why are they effective in marketing? Essentially, it comes down to our brains. Our brains were built for stories. Our brains love the format and the structure of stories because essentially our brains are trying to do 2 things. One, they're trying to help us survive and thrive in this world. So anything that our brain detects will help us survive and thrive, it instantly will push that to a high priority, and we'll remember it, we'll pay attention to it, we'll be engaged with it. Because our brain is trying to, secondly, conserve calories. And if our brain has to work too hard to connect the dots on why NERSA is going to help them survive and thrive, then it will deprioritize that message in an effort to conserve energy and conserve calories, because we live in a world where noise is the status quo. And noise, this right here, is our #1 enemy in marketing. More than our competitors, more than any kind of other events, noise is our enemy, because noise leads to confusion. And confused people don't make decisions, don't act, and they're definitely not going to do something that they think is stretching them. Confusion is our enemy. Imagine our brains as if they're on a treadmill. Whenever they go to a website or see an email or a text message, our brain is now on a treadmill. If it has to work hard, it's going to hop off that treadmill. If it has to burn a lot of calories to connect the dots and understand some of the core questions that it's asking, what does your company do? How does this solve a problem? How do I get going? If we don't instantly answer those questions, then we are going to get lost in noise, because it's just too much work for our brain to handle with all the noise around it. So, what is a mechanism so that we can sift through this? How can we achieve clarity? Clarity will be our differentiator. In the book highlights this over and over. If you confuse, you lose. So clarity is how you actually stand out, and you do this best through the power of story. Story has been proven over the history of humanity to cut through the noise, to communicate to a person how they can survive, how they can thrive in the real world, and then it's very memorable. So it's the most effective mechanism for all of marketing. But that leads to the second question. Well, how do we implement stories in any kind of way that we can scale? Are we going to sit everybody down and just inundate them with long stories? No, that's not what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to use a story framework. It's like scaffolding that we're going to build our messaging around. And let's take a look at what that looks like. It's essentially like what you would see with the hero's journey. You have a story blueprint. A story always begins with a hero, and she runs into a villain or a problem and meets a guide along the way. This guide has a plan for overcoming that villain and calls that hero to action. And she either takes that call and succeeds, or she doesn't and she goes through an epic failure. And the more clearly we illustrate this entire journey, this entire story, then the more we're going to penetrate through the noise. And the thing is, through this entire process, this hero is expecting some kind of a transformation. They will be transforming throughout this process. The hero that began is now a different person now that she's completed this journey. We're going to use this to build our message. You see it in movies, you see it in books, you see it with Star Wars and Harry Potter and Jason Bourne and Lord of the Rings. I mean, you can't think of a story that doesn't follow this structure. And so understanding that a little bit and how we can use it in marketing is going to force us to ask, well, who is who in a marketing, from a marketing standpoint, who is who within this story framework? So let's look at some of the main characters here. So we have three that I'll point out quickly. You have the hero, you have the villain, and you have the guide. Let's take a little look into each. So the hero, this is the number one question you hear is, who's the hero of our message? And oftentimes the answer is us. It's us at NERSA. We're the ones with the solution. We're going to come in and solve their problems. They've got this pain and we're going to save them. They're the damsel in distress and we're the ones that swoop in. So they'd say, we're the hero. This is absolutely false. If we are trying to tell our heroic story to our customers, it's competing with the hero story they're already telling themselves. So the hero, they're clinicians, they're directors of nursing, they're schedulers. These are our heroes in the story, and we don't want our story to compete with their story. This sounds simple and like, oh, that's a nice Instagram post that our customers are our heroes. No, this is not just some cheesy thing. This is something that will be fundamental in the way that we communicate. Are we telling a story that clinicians recognize as theirs and that we can then fold ourselves into? And as a big part of that story, who are the villains? Villains are problems. These are different problems that our heroes run into. A lot of people will say these are the feelings that you get from your problems, like anxiety, overwork, or exhaustion. But we'll go into this more. The villain, it's more than just a feeling. That's not just a song from the 80s. The villain is something more than just a feeling. It's actually an external, an internal, or a philosophical problem that needs to be overcome. And we're going to take a deeper dive into this. Now let's look at the guide. Who is the guide in the story? This is where we finally get to us. Our team and our software, we are the guide that is coming. We have here to help them out on their journey. We have a plan and we have a call to adventure. And we'll get more into this, but we come with empathy, so we're listening, and we also come with authority, so we're worth listening to. This is what we come to the table with. So those are the fundamentals of building a story brand. We have a hero that has a villain to overcome. They meet a guide who has a plan, and then they're kicked in the butt and called to action. Say, go out there on your adventure, and that either leads to success or epic failure. And that's the end of this video. But the next one, we're going to be going more into these different characters and how we can talk about clarify what the hero's journey is actually like. How can we be super clear about the villain so it's something people resonate with and they have a visceral reaction against? And then how can we actually identify ourselves as the helpful guide that can be folded into their story? And a spoiler alert, we're then going to be going through our brand script where we'll be mapping all of this out and talking about the character transformation throughout this process. So now that's really the end of this video, and excited to share more with you and get your ideas about this. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.